Arachnids in the UK, the latest episode of the new season of Doctor Who, is unfortunately the closest we're going to get to any Halloween content this year. I had planned to actually ask you guys if there was anything Halloweeny that you wanted me to review this year, and you can still submit stuff if you want. It's just I forgot because I suck. Though this is a Horror Who episode, so it's not that far off from Halloween-esque content, I guess. Doctor Who, when it does horror, tends to get pretty creepy. And there were certainly creepy moments in this episode, though I will say right out the gate, it's my least favorite of the new season so far. And that is not because, as some of you guys know from watching my Skyrim Let's Play, I am deathly afraid of spiders. It's actually in spite of that. I actually find spiders quite interesting, and I like to be scared. So seeing an episode of Doctor Who, a show which examines things very carefully, involving spiders as a horror monster, that had me excited. The premise of the episode is, the Doctor finally gets her new companions home, as they aren't technically her companions yet at this point, as I mentioned in the previous review. But none of them really want to go their separate ways yet, so Yaz invites the Doctor over to her house for, like, tea or dinner or something, I don't really remember exactly, and the others ask if they can come along, and she says of course. And you can tell the Doctor doesn't want to go off on her own either and is delighted by this idea. And in true cliched Doctor Who fashion, this puts the Doctor exactly where she needs to be to get involved with the thick of things. Paralleling real-life events, spiders have begun to invade the UK, specifically Sheffield, where all of these characters originate from. They're behaving strangely, and throughout the course of the episode, the Doctor does encounter a very large spider, a very large variation on an actual spider from that area, which has attacked and killed and cocooned up a human for later consumption. These spiders have gotten so big at this point, and they're behaving so far outside the norm, that they're attacking and killing people. And this one spider turns out to be one of the smaller of the bunch. There's a scientist character who becomes a temporary companion for the Doctor after the Doctor bumps into her at Yaz's apartment building, who is a scientist working on experiments on spiders. Spider biology is really freaking cool. Spider silk, for example, has a tensile strength greater than steel. So this scientist and the other people at her lab have been working on extending the lifespan of spiders, since spiders grow throughout their entire lifespan, in the hopes that they can get bigger spiders with more interesting biological quirks that can be learned about and exploited. But they're always very careful. These spiders, they still die. They still eventually die off, and then the carcasses are disposed of. And as such, this woman can't imagine that her lab and her experiments have anything to do with the giant spiders that are encountered in this episode. Everything culminates at a hotel being built by an American hotel tycoon. This guy repurposes land which needs to be repurposed, land which isn't really being used for anything anymore, to build his hotels. Which in and of itself is fine, but it turns out he also contracts out to let people dispose of waste underneath the hotels where nobody will see it. It's all very legal and all very dangerous for the environment, and in this case it just so happens that he disposed of the wrong kind of stuff. That he not only disposed of just regular refuse, but the spider carcasses down there, and this somehow caused the spider carcasses to mutate and come back to life, or maybe they weren't completely dead to begin with, it's never really fully explained, and keep growing, and so they've been growing into giant spiders beneath and inside his hotel. And the Doctor and her companions eventually deduce that there is a giant mother spider, one that's larger than any of the others, somewhere in the building or under the building or something, and that she's been sending out huge amounts of spider pheromones, and that's what's been causing spiders throughout the area to act strangely. It's also what's been keeping all of the giant spiders in this one building. So thank you, giant mother spider. You'll notice that I'm not putting a huge amount of clips in this video, and that is on purpose. I don't want to include images of the spiders unless I absolutely have to, and I will warn you guys before I do later on, as I do know that arachnophobia is a very real thing, and I don't want to trigger it unless I have to. All that said, it's through the aspect of the plot that deals with this hotel that we meet Yaz's mom.
Nadia.
Right, Nadia, sorry.
It's Nadia.
Right, sorry. Anyway, Nadia is a really awesome character. She was the hotel manager for this hotel. She gets fired by the hotel developer guy because he's an asshole, and he almost discovered that he's dumping waste illegally underneath his hotel. And so she's there through the whole thing, and I really like her. I like her a lot. I like her interactions with Yaz. She seems to be pushing Yaz into a relationship with somebody. She respects that Yaz is all about work, but thinks that there is more to life than that and wants her daughter to experience that. And she's just a badass character in general. She was an asset to this team. I really hope we see more of her in the future. The episode culminates with the revelation that this American hotel developer, puts panic rooms in all of his hotels. And so the group has the idea to use vibrations to lure all the spiders into the panic room and then lock it up so that they will eventually die of old age without having the chance to harm anyone. A humane death for animals who don't know that what they're doing is wrong. This doesn't include the giant mother spider though, so they do have to go after her, and here's that trigger warning I mentioned. The American guy, because he's American, decides to grab his gun and shoot and kill the mother spider, which the doctor takes issue with. Turns out this spider had grown so large at this point that her organs couldn't sustain her anymore. She was suffocating to death already. There was no need to kill her. And so once again we have an example of this new incarnation of the Doctor sympathizing with her enemies, more so probably than any past version of the Doctor has. Here we have creatures that are incredibly alien looking, and they evoke a very primal kind of fear in a large percentage of the population, and the Doctor is still able to empathize with them. She's able to find them sympathetic. And all that's fine, but along with that we got more commentary on why weapons equal bad. And as I said in the previous review, I do agree that violence should be used as a last resort, but that doesn't mean that violence isn't sometimes necessary. This is where my main problem with the episode comes from. This episode tried to make a lot of points all at once. It tried to be an episode about protecting the environment, and an episode about pacifism, and an episode about animal rights, and an episode about not using guns, all at once, and it was a little too much. I know it's kind of tradition in Doctor Who for the parents of the companion or somebody else who knows the companion to become involved in events entirely without the Doctor interfering in things first, but it just feels a little too contrived, especially for this modern version of the show that's trying to be more of a modern TV show. That not only does the Doctor show up at the very building where one of these spiders has by chance escaped the hotel, but for Yaz's mom to also coincidentally be wrapped up in this whole thing as she was an employee of the person who indirectly caused all of this. I also, and not because I'm a white American, I want to make that clear, I also kind of take issue with the fact that the woman who was experimenting on these animals wasn't really blamed for this at all, but the guy who, I mean, yeah, he was dumping crap under his hotel, and that was bad, but he had no way of knowing that would lead to all of this. He is shouldered with most of the blame here. It really does feel like there was enough blame to go around, honestly, and this episode could have been about not experimenting on animals so carelessly as well. And it's not as if I have an issue with Doctor Who having messages in it. Doctor Who has always been a message show. It's always been the kind of show that leads by example rather than preaching to us. And this episode wasn't like that. This episode felt preachy. But only for part of the runtime. When it wasn't feeling preachy, it felt like a good old-fashioned horror Doctor Who episode. The spiders were pretty creepy. The CG on them was really solid. I'm going to show some examples here, so again, trigger warning for arachnids. The CG kind of started to fall apart with the larger examples of the creature, but they did do a good job of managing to keep them in the background where it wouldn't be as noticeable, and the weird robotic movements of a CG character work really well for something like a spider. They add to the creep factor. There's also some stuff in this episode that I haven't talked about yet, some scenes of Graham grieving over the loss of Grace, and at the end these three people do officially ask the Doctor to come along and be her companions, and they all have their own interesting reasons for it. Graham realizes that he has to grieve over the loss of Grace, but he doesn't want to do it sitting around in his house. He wants to get out there and do something worthwhile as he is going through this grieving period. And Ryan and Yaz are both just different kinds of bored of their everyday lives and want to go out there and experience all that the universe has to offer. The Doctor gives them the prerequisite warning that she may not be able to protect them, and they go with her. Now they are companions proper, and I'm really excited to see where this dynamic goes in the future. Though I will say that with this Doctor being so much more pacifistic than past versions have really been, the show is heading towards a head, I think. There is going to have to be a moment where that pacifism is challenged, and I really can't wait to see how this Doctor handles that, because I don't think she's going to handle it well. Like, I can't remember the last time I was this excited to see Doctor character development. So at the end of the day, even if the episode was kind of lackluster, the promise of that and the horror elements made it better. But as per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of this episode of Doctor Who if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.